Hello, Dom Shaw here for the latest episode of You Are My Borough, and I'm delighted to be joined by Rob Law from BBC Radio T Sport, who fills the enormous boots of Scott Wilson, who's been out in Germany covering Newcastle for their Champions League game at Leverkusen. While he was there, me and Rob were at the Valley on Tuesday night to see Kim Hellberg make it 3 wins out of 3 as Borough boss. The gap to Coventry, leaders Coventry, cut to just 5 points. That's been halved, that deficit, in the last week or so. And Rob, we did our last vid, me and Scott did our last vid pod before the Hull game, and we were both in agreement, really. If you get 4 points out of 6 at Hull and Charlton, that's some return. I mean, 6 points is obviously brilliant, but I think it's the manner of the victories as well, isn't it, that has just built excitement and raised hopes and just lifted spirits even more. It's been a pretty perfect week for Hellberg and Borough, hasn't it?
A perfect week and a dream start, hasn't it? I mean, Kim Hellberg surely couldn't have imagined it going as well as it has. And, no slight on his skill set or anything like that. But this is just from what he walked into, which was a team that was really struggling to find connections at the top end of the pitch, was struggling to just find that spark sometimes in midfield, accused of lacking ideas in forward areas and all of those things. And he's come in and he's just lifted it once more. And the connections now we're seeing play out in front of our eyes are such a contrast to what we were seeing at the start of the season and under he who shall not be named. It's an incredible start. And I said on the other night before the Charlton game, I know there'll be Borough fans who will probably either read some of your stuff, Dom, listen to what we're saying on BBC Radio T Sport and go, oh, calm down, it's 2 or 3 games, let's not get carried away. And I absolutely respect that and understand that as well. But you can only judge it on the evidence of what you're seeing right now. And granted, it is a small sample size, 2-3 games now. But it's the manner of it, as you say. It is the way in which they are picking apart teams. It is the way in which they are just rampaging forward at times and looking like they're going to score at every given opportunity, albeit the Valley was a little bit different. They had to, they had chances early on. It could have been much more comfortable than it perhaps was by halftime. But there's just so many impressive things about this Kim Hellberg side. He's really impressive as well as an individual. And without trying to get carried away, it's really hard not to, given the type of performances and the manner of the victories.
I think as a fan, maybe in the position where it's different, but as a fan, get carried away.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's all about,
why not? Why not get carried away?
If you're not supporting a club that is finishing in the top 4 or 5 of the Premier League, then you have to sit through a fair bit of dross, don't you? Let's be honest. Supporting every club other than those at the very top of the Premier League. So when good, exciting times come along, ride with it, really, and go with your gut. And I think your gut tells you that Borough are onto something good. And like you say, really, when you're in the early stages of a tenure, of an era, then I think you probably got to go with your gut more than anything else, other than those who, have the time and knowledge to dig back and look through all of Kim Hellberg's teams from the past, maybe in Sweden and seasons from the past, and those with that knowledge. And Hellberg himself promised us exciting attacking football, but I came away from his first press conference before the Derby game thinking, well, and he'd almost said it himself, it's going to take time. I have been blown away by how quickly he has made Borough look like a Kim Hellberg team, and I think the one thing that I came away from Charlton thinking was, I asked Nathan Jones afterwards, I said, you've taken charge of a team mid-season before. With that in mind, like you'll know and you'll understand the challenges. So with that in mind, how impressive is it what Kim Hellberg's done at Borough? And he was complimentary of Hellberg. He said, like, he's clearly a really, really good coach. You can see how well coached they are. But he said, what I would say is, he came into a team that were in the top two, that had been playing well, that he's clearly come into a squad with what he described as Premier League quality. Well, I take that on board, but Boro had won 3 out of 11 games and they were stuttering. And really, it was only the inconsistency and maybe the lack of quality of the teams below that had Boro still in the top two at that point. There is no doubt that they've improved, and I think improved quite significantly over the course of the last 3 games.
Yeah, exactly that. You know, as I said, the struggles for those of us who are fortunate enough to watch and follow Middlesbrough week in, week out throughout the season, were all too aware of the issues that were there. And maybe for people on the outside, they look at it and will go,
100%.
yeah, well, yeah, like Nathan Jones there. They were second in the table. Third in the table. What do you expect? You know, he's just picked up and they've ran with it, and he probably hasn't had to tweak too much. But those of us who do and have seen it week in, week out are all aware of the issues that were there and were starting to appear more and more often. And those were the overriding questions, weren't they, in the press conferences, in the post-match interviews with Edwards? You know, how are you going to get this team ticking at the top end of the pitch? Are you confident the goals will come? How do you try and get confidence into these players? Whatever the questions were, it was all about the forward line and how he was going to get this to tick, because they weren't scoring goals. Games were becoming more of a grind. And there was that feeling, and okay, hindsight is a wonderful thing, but there was that feeling that, can Boro sustain this? That was a conversation we were having, both in the media and fans in the stand. Can realistically Boro maintain this start to the campaign, given the issues that are there? Hellberg has come in, and I think the other thing, you know, you say you're surprised at how much this looks like a Kim Hellberg side already. I absolutely agree with you. The thing that makes it even more impressive, he's had to do it with only really 1 full week on a training ground. You know, on the training pitch, because his first game in, he had a session and a half, maybe, which is really only a session, and then a little bit potentially of tactical work and set pieces on the Friday before the game on the Saturday. Then he gets the full week. Obviously, there's the midweek game this week with Charlton ahead of then a big game against QPR on Saturday. So he hasn't had an awful lot of time to implement what he wants to do. And obviously managers and head coaches will say the best recipe for that sometimes is the games, because the evidence is there in real time, in real conditions, and you can show the players exactly where they're going right and where he wants them to improve. So there's probably a bit of that as well. But to have had this impact with not an awful lot of time on the training pitch is what makes it equally as impressive.
And the other thing, and I wrote it yesterday in my kind of post-match analysis, 3 games in, I watched Wolves versus Man United on Monday.
Yeah.
My God, has Rob Edwards got his work cut out there? You know, I can't say that I watched a lot of Wolves. Obviously, we cover Newcastle and Sunderland as well at the Echo, but Scott did the Newcastle and Sunderland Wolves games earlier this season, so I didn't see Wolves before Edwards went in. So I don't know how they're looking now compared to how they look at the start of the season, but they're going down. There is no way they're staying up. You come away from Tuesday night, 3 wins out of 3, but also just judging on how Boro look, not just the results, but how Boro look, and compare that to how they looked in those weeks before Edwards left. And I think you're looking now thinking, is Edwards' decision to join Wolves actually the best thing that could have happened to Boro, because it gave them the opportunity to appoint Kim Hellberg, and you're feeling now, as we've just talked about for 10 minutes there, is that Boro are in a better position now than what they were, 4 or 5 weeks ago.
Yeah, I think that is that it's hard to argue against that, isn't it? It really is, just given the fact that the goals they're scoring, the manner of the performances, the fact that they are looking so bright and so sharp, and the not discounting the the strength in depth he's sort of managed to unpick as well, albeit defensively, you know, there's injury issues there, but haven't looked like Boro have been struggling for centre-backs, has it? You know, Matt Targett's come in,
been great. Yeah.
been brilliant. Alfie Jones, again, continues to just be a colossal. And Callum Brittain, who's doing brilliant. But Alex Bangura, the fact that he saw something in him after 22 months out to go, yeah, right, in you go. And he has a brilliant performance. Then to do a similar thing with Alex Gilbert, who had been nowhere near it under Edwards, not even in the matchday squad. And it was actually, wasn't it Adi Vivash who sort of started putting in and around the bench, and albeit never got any minutes, but he was on the bench and he was in the matchday squad. And then there you go, Alex Gilbert, crack on. And he absolutely does. And he has an incredible game where he got our BBC Radio T Sport man of the match. He got a goal, he got an assist against Hull City. Oh, it was just an incredible performance. So, yeah, I think Boro look much healthier, don't they, overall, in terms of the squad, the harmony within it. And again, it's hard. It's really hard not to get carried away. But as you said, you know, quite rightly so, people shouldn't feel ashamed of getting carried away because, as we all know, these moments don't come around too often. But it does feel now like Boro are in a stronger position. Now, granted, if this is a new manager bounce or what, only time will tell. But for the meantime, 3 games, 3 wins, 3 successive wins for just the second time this season. Scoring goals for fun, you know, not conceding many either. And now you're going into games and thinking, yeah, well, fancy him there. So, and granted, football's not played on paper, is it? But now, all of a sudden, Boro are chipping away at Coventry's lead. They're opening up a bit of a gap to 3rd. So
and 7th as well, which I know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, good
point. I know we're looking up, but that is also significant, isn't it? For if a blip comes down the line.
Yeah, 100%. And undoubtedly that time will come, won't it? Because no team is going to continue on sort of this vein of form for the rest of the season. No doubt there'll be defeats, there'll be draws, there'll be frustrating afternoons and evenings at home and at away as well. But yeah, the gap is widening. They've got themselves in a good position. It's coming into a really busy period now, as it always is. We'll probably learn an awful lot more about Kim Hellberg and his side and his players in these coming sort of next couple of weeks into the new year. But on the evidence we've seen so far, you would back them to deal with that and more.
Let's talk Alex Gilbert a bit more. I mean, here's a revelation for you. In Friday's paper, when we did the predicted team ahead of the whole game, I didn't have Alex Gilbert playing as a number 6.
You surprised me.
He played 70 championship minutes last season. I think he'd been in the squad on only 5 occasions this season, an unused sub in all of those. He couldn't nail down a place for Charlton in League One in the second half of last season. He was out of the squad for 13 straight games at the start of this season. Edwards clearly wasn't having him. And yet a conversation I had last week was that actually in training, he's been really, really good for weeks now, even before Hellberg's arrival. Now, what you'd say there is that shows a fair bit of character to know that you're not going to get a look in. The manager isn't having you, but still to turn in day out and to actually put it in on the training ground. I don't mean put it in terms of an effort, but to impress, to shine, to have people saying that about you. But I think the other thing is when Hellberg came in, he said, it's a clean slate. I'm judging on what I see. All managers say that. Yeah. Every single, you never will a manager come in and say, well, actually, it's not a clean slate. I've already made my mind up on 3 or 4 players. Every manager says that. But what it really is with Hellberg, isn't it? I mean, Bangura in, Gilbert in, Lucas Hengel coming back and will be given a chance to force his way and play his way back into the squad. But how Gilbert has taken it, and you're sat here now saying, you know, if and when Aidan Morris is back fit, Alan Brown was back in the squad on Tuesday, but had to be on the bench. It's horses for courses, clearly, and I suspect Hellberg will pick his team depending on what the opposition looks like as well and what he thinks best counteracts that. But How do you? I can't believe I'm saying this now compared to where you go back. How do you leave Gilbert out after his performance against Hull and Charlton? He's been brilliant, hasn't he? Really, really good.
I was blown away, as I'm sure all of us were, by his performance at Hull, and he looked sharp. He didn't look off the pace in the slightest. And if he had looked off the pace, you'd maybe forgive him slightly for that, given the fact that he hadn't. It was his first minutes of the season, but he looked so comfortable. And his partnership with Hayden Hackney in that game in particular, again, did the same at Charlton, but in particular against Hull, they looked almost like two sides of the same coin a little bit.
He said to you after, didn't he, that they've played together in training for God knows how long now, so they feel like they know each other really well.
It was really interesting because I asked him a couple of things. One round his kind of touching on what you said there around his mentality and how do you keep confident and how do you keep chipping away when maybe you feel that the opportunities are deserved or that you've earned them and worked hard for them, but they don't arrive. And he just said, you know, it is absolutely, it's in your head. And the second you let that thought creep in, then you're done. And you're not going to impress in training and you're not going to get those opportunities. And you just have to keep believing that they will come eventually and making sure that you're prepared that when they do come, you're able to take them. And boy, has he done that. And what you said there, you know, about hearing that he'd been putting in those performances for weeks. Again, that was shown by Adi Vivash, who anybody who's heard Adi Vivash speak, you know, isn't in the business of charity, is he? In handing out places or ceremonial spots on the bench. You're there if you deserve to be there under Adi Vivash, and he gave him, his space on the bench, and albeit didn't come on and get the minutes, but certainly showed that he was in his thoughts and had impressed enough to get that space on the bench. And then, as you say, Kim Hellberg comes in. I said this to Neil Madison on Tuesday night ahead of Charlton, exactly that about the idea of many managers up and down the country, all over the world, will say, new beginning, clean slate, here you go, come on, impress me, and if you train well, you're in the team. And we all know that as much as managers often say that, it very rarely comes to pass in that way. And sometimes it can be a stick that people used to beat the manager with, don't they?
Especially when the team's playing well as well, or has been, is at the top end of the table.
Yeah, and people will say, oh, well, he didn't cut the mustard on that game, but then he starts, or why does he always start and he hasn't been great? And Kim Hellberg straight away has now evidence to show to the rest of his squad in a short space of time, 3 games, to say, look, what happens in training matters. And he said that in press conferences and interviews since, hasn't he? He's been quite firm on that I want to foster a culture where training matters. And to people listening, they might think, well, absolutely it does, and it should. But as we know, it's not always the case, is it? Whether it's players who are being managed because of age, injuries, or otherwise, or whether it's loads of different things that might play into that. But for him to now be able to say, Alex Bangura trained well, got the start, you're in. Alex Gilbert trained well, he's in. Tommy Conway, okay, not scoring, putting in the work rate, linking up really well with those around him, getting assists, making a nuisance of himself, keeps his place in the team. And I think that for a manager, especially a new manager coming through the door, is worth its weight in gold, because the evidence is there. And for players, they want that evidence, don't they? Whether it's, why have I been dropped? Well, here, this is the reason why. Or why is he starting? Well, because he trained well. Why am I not starting? Because I need to see more from you in training. Okay. And then everybody knows where they stand. And I think that is what they have now with Kim Hellberg, is a manager who is going to base his decisions on what happens in training, which, as simple as it may sound, isn't as I say, it isn't always the case.
Always the case. The other thing I think is when we'd spoken to a couple, and I know you did the same, spoken to a couple of Swedish reporters when Hellberg first came in to kind of do stuff on what to expect from him. And a couple of them said separately to me that at Hammarby, he made a habit of finding a new position for players, playing them in positions that they've never played before and that nobody envisaged them playing. I think Gilbert's the first example of that. He said it himself. He hasn't played as a number 6. Nobody would have called playing Gilbert as a holding midfielder, would they? Even when the team came out on Friday night at Hull, I'm thinking, well, does that mean McGree's playing deeper because McGree played in that position in the second half against Derby? I would never have thought he'd have played Gilbert there. It'll be interesting to see down the line whether we see any more of that. But let's hope he doesn't play Alfie Jones as a makeshift centre forward, because he has been, as you said there, immense, hasn't he? And for all the attack deserves credit. 8 goals in 3 games. I think Boro scored more in the first half at Hull than they'd managed in Edwards' last 4 games in charge. But the defence haven't kept a clean sheet yet. But the 3 goals they've conceded, one came after 84 seconds when they were clearly caught cold. Another one's a penalty that shouldn't have been a penalty. Another one's a bit of a fluke, freak own goal. It's a mistake from Edmondson, but that doesn't happen every week, does it? On the whole, Boro have looked really, really solid, haven't they, as well? Which I think is extra credit to them, because he's managed to find that balance quickly as well.
Yeah, and again, albeit with at times makeshift centre back.
With one central defender, yeah.
Absolutely. And granted, we saw against Charlton the fact that Luke Ayling back in the squad and came on in the second half, George Edmondson, as you mentioned, back in and around it. So that situation is easing, but you would not have guessed it. You would not have seen that or even pointed to the fact that Boro have looked weaker because they only have one fit centre-back. Or, Matt Targett has been brilliant in that role and slotted in there. Kim Hellberg, I think, he said it to you in the press conference the other week, or it might have been Craig, but said, he looks like he's played there his entire career, and that's a huge credit to him. Granted, he's not the tallest either, but still able to get his big old forehead on the end of a cross into the box to score a goal like a proper centre half. And Alfie Jones, there's so much to like about Alfie Jones. He's always his positional sort of whereabouts. He sees danger. He tracks runners. He's good in the tackle. He's good in the air. He can be strong when he needs to be. He can be tidy with the ball at his feet when he needs to be. And Callum Brittain, at one point this season, 4 assists in 6 games he had, showing that his quality going forward, just as much as coming back as well, has to be one of the best right backs in the division at the minute. Without a doubt, he has to be in that conversation. And really good business from Boro in that sense. And Sol Brynn, should mention Sol Brynn because against Charlton, called into action only a couple of times, but made 2 really big saves in pivotal moments in the game. And that can often be hard. We often hear goalkeepers talk about, it can be one of the most difficult things. Isn't when your goal's being peppered with shots. It's often when you don't have a lot to do and then you're called into action. And it was that kind of night for him against Charlton. Similar night against Hull City without an awful lot to do, barring the penalty, which he almost saved with his toes, didn't he? As he dove to the left, and it was Gelhardt put it down the centre. So overall, despite, no clean sheet in 8 now, I think, but looking at them defensively, you don't, or certainly personally, I don't have any concerns about Boro defensively and fear that they're going to be carved open or anything like that. And it's how quickly, as we saw against Charlton, they can change it from attack to defense, defense to attack, which is where the second goal came from. In the last few seconds of the first half, defending their own goal, bang, ran through the centre, worked out, and then it's in the back of the net. And again, that equally, being able to defend your own goal, but use it as a catalyst to attack. Boro have done that with ease in these 3 games.
Well, it wasn't a 50-50 that Brittain won in his own box. It was a 30-70, wasn't it? That he won against Tyrese Campbell. He just wanted it more, and then Boro broke at speed. I think just on those three, on Targett, Jones, and Brittain, I think Boro's recruitment team deserve immense credit, Kieran Scott and Chris Jones, because those three players are not the profile of player that Boro have on the whole signed over the course of the last few years. I think Brittain's 27, Jones is 28, is Targett 29 or 30?
29.
29. But there was clearly an acceptance last season that Boro needed a bit more experience, I think a bit more championship nous, but also players, touch wood, who are durable enough to last a championship season. And has Brittain missed one game so far this season when he got that bit of a freak foot knock at Southampton, was it? And he missed the game after that. Jones, I think I'm right in saying Jones, Hackney and Brittain, I think, are the three outfield players who've played more minutes than anyone else. Yeah. But I think Boro are being rewarded, really, for the flexibility of the recruitment team. And yes, Boro have a model of the type of players they want to sign, but they also judge on what they see on the pitch. And last season, it was blatantly obvious that Boro needed a bit more experience. They needed a bit more championship steel, didn't they? Yeah. How many times last season did we say Boro just felt too soft? And Jones and Brittain, I mean, if we're having the player of the season conversation now, they're both right there in the conversation.
Completely agree. And on that recruitment of those two in particular, leaders, albeit maybe not your stereotypical leaders of barking and shouting, but leaders in the sense of leaving no stone unturned. I remember speaking to one of our colleagues who was covering Blackburn after Callum Brittain signed. And the one thing they said was that obviously his fitness and being available, but they said he is a person who he works in details and he works in finer details and making sure that no corner is cut and trying to be an example to the rest of the team. And I think that is similarly what you have in Alfie Jones as well. And they've just been, both of them, really, really impressive. And there was some question marks over some of them as well, over, did all right at Blackburn, but can he step up and do it at a club like Middlesbrough where maybe there's
Jones,
exactly. Same with Alfie Jones. Can they do it where at a team where it's expected for you to be up there fighting for at least a playoff place every season, a little bit maybe more scrutiny on it as well? And they've answered those incredibly so much so Alfie Jones is now a Canadian international, and that goes to show you, I suppose, the level of his performances. So those two in particular from the recruitment, and like you quite rightly said, albeit slightly different to the overall model we've seen. They're not a Sunji Hansen, they're not a Kali Sen. These are championship proven players, and I think it also shows the importance of having that mixture. It's all right we're going to try our best to cherry pick or look at the figures, look at the numbers, do all the homework and try and pick out some of the best young up and coming talent from around Europe, bring them to the Boro, give them a chance to develop, and hopefully that becomes a self-sustaining model in the future where they do well for Boro, it goes hand in hand, maybe some bigger clubs come in for them and you can sell them on for a profit. Granted, and that that is a common sense sort of model that a lot of clubs now are using. The difference being, and we've all seen it, clubs who go too far that way, and the fact that that's the only recruitment they do, and they don't still then invest in players who are proven at the level the team are playing at. And that's what Boro have done. They've seen that, and they've gone, we can still do this, but we also need to do this and address these things. And that's where Callum Brittain and Alfie Jones come in.
And Matt Targett too. I mean, it's no secret that Boro wanted, but really wanted to sign Max Arfson in the summer as a top left back target. But when they accepted defeat there, really, and let's see whether that one's revisited in the future. I'm not sure, but when they had to accept defeat there, they accepted at that point, right? A Premier League loan is going to be their best option. They had a number of options. Targett wasn't the only player; they had a number of options, but they decided Targett was the one they wanted for a number of reasons. And I remember when he signed that there was a fair few questions about his injury record.
Yeah.
But actually, when they dug deeper, he'd had the one big injury, really. And I think I was there when he did it at Man United. He did his hamstring, a serious hamstring injury. But last year, he'd actually been available for the vast majority of the season. Just so happens that Newcastle have now got Lewis Hall playing at left back, who's probably England's best left back, and Kieran Trippier can play there, Tino Livramento can play there, Dan Burn covers there. So Targett clearly had his work cut out there. But again, although from the outside looking in, it might have looked like a bit of a gamble. Boro were told, no, Matt Targett has been available. He's had a good long stretch of availability under his belt now. He's had a full pre-season under his belt, and he's benefiting as well. And he's out of contract Targett in the summer, so he's going to be a free agent in the summer. No idea what his future looks like at Boro. That's one that we can discuss down the line. But if he continues in his current form, he's not going to have a problem finding a club next summer, whether that's Boro or anyone else. He's been excellent as well, hasn't he?
Yeah, and I'm sure there's already other clubs keeping an eye on that situation as well, given the fact that he is out of contract come the summer. Because the one thing he's done during his time at Boro is showcase his versatility especially in the last couple of weeks, hasn't he? He's also shown he can score some goals as well. So yeah, he has been perhaps maybe gone slightly under the radar, given the fact Bangura's come back in after such a long period of time out. Obviously, more recently, Alex Gilbert as well, Callum Brittain, Alfie Jones getting a lot of plaudits, quite rightly so. Targett may be the one just at the minute who is going a little bit under the radar for his contributions to the team in this period. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens when you get Dale Fry back. Edmondson's obviously in and around it more now. Luke Ayling coming back. So what does Kim Hellberg do there? Does he revert Matt Targett back to left back? But then you're dropping Alex Bangura, who has been phenomenal. So now you're going from having a conversation about who and where Boro what are they going to do defensively, from a stance of them having so many injuries. You're now looking at it from a stance of they've got so many options.
Well, and then there's Adilson Malanda. January.
Add that into the mix.
Lucas Engel, as I mentioned earlier, is going to be back and he's going to get his chance to play his way into the plans. Let's see how that one plays out, because Boro have a 25-man squad to think about, which is currently maxed out. So there's going to be changes in January. But one player who won't be coming back is Neto Borges. He's on loan at Bristol City. Yeah. And he did an interview down at Bristol this week where he talked about his willingness, really. I'm very open, he said, to making that move permanent. And from what we gather, Boro won't be recalling Borges in January. He has 18 months left on his deal. I think there's every chance Borges has probably played his last game for Boro. It's QPR next on Saturday. You're talking about going under the radar. QPR are going under the radar. They're in great form, as is Roman Burrell, the former Boro striker.
Yeah.
And, I think it's great when a player, nobody was, when Burrell left Boro, nobody was calling for Boro to hold on to Burrell, thinking he could be a prolific championship centre forward. But isn't it great when a player has to take a step back to sometimes take a step forward again? And credit to him, really, for how he's built back up since leaving Boro. And credit to QPR, they're having a really good season.
Yeah, and he's been around the houses a bit, hasn't he, Burrell? But I was talking to Neil Madison about him, actually, on the way back from Charlton yesterday, and he said a similar thing. He said you would have never forecast him to have gone on and done the things that he's done. Did well at Brittain last season, was it, in League One? Yeah. Obviously then got the move to QPR, and again question marks over him and whether he could make that step up. and he's flying. 9 goals for the season at this point, and showing that quality. Jamaican international as well, if I'm right in that saying that. I think so. But he's done brilliantly, and no doubt on Saturday he will come at it with the idea of maybe trying to show what he was capable of all along. Boro picked him up from Grimsby, and he certainly, it shows that it shows he's got something about him, sort of not just as a player, but I think mentally as well. You've got to, as a character, you've got to back yourself, haven't you? And if it's not working for you at a club like Middlesbrough, to then go, no, I'm, if it means dropping down a division, if it means moving to the other end of the country, if it whatever, I'm going to go and do it because I believe in myself. And we all have seen players in the past who may be reluctant to do that, whether it be at Boro or whether it be at other clubs. So you have to give him a huge immense amount of credit. And he's doing the business for QPR, and he shows no signs of letting up either.
And they're one of a few teams, and just to wrap up, they're one of a few teams up at the top end. I wouldn't have envisaged being there at the start of the season. QPR, Preston, Hull. Start the season, I'd have probably had all those 3 teams struggling at the bottom end of the table. It's going to be another tough game for Boro, isn't it, on Saturday? And I say another tough game. They've made the last few weeks look easy, but Derby had won 5 out of 6. Hull climbed into the top 6 with their win last night. Charlton are on a slump. Charlton have lost 5 on the bounce now. But chatting to Rich Corley, who's their local reporter down there, and he was saying that it's not too long ago that they were saying down there, could we be in the mix for the top 6 this season? So they've clearly got something about them there. Hellberg hasn't had an easy start by any means, and it's not going to be easy on Saturday, is it?
No, he hasn't had an easy start, although he's made it look easy. And you're right to point out those stats around both Derby and Hull City. I thought the Hull one was, okay, this Derby was a really tricky first game. The Hull game, I thought, okay, you get the win against Derby, but this away from home as well is going to be a test, and breezed through it. And Jukirovic at times in that first half, I mean, he didn't even look interested in terms of trying to figure out what Boro were doing in the mid. No tactical changes whatsoever, which just baffled me in commentary. I was saying to Neil, I was like, he's not even pulling players over and, all right, you need to drop in here. There was nothing like that from Jukirovic. I was really disappointed from him in that sense. But it was all to Boro's benefit, obviously. And then Charlton, the one thing I would say about the Charlton game was the fact that really difficult circumstances around the game, considering what had happened and the passing of the Charlton sort of super fan Norman Barker. That was the one thing that maybe just put that element of doubt in there. I think, considering it was,
you never know how the impact that's going to have. Do you?
How will exactly? And the crowd were up for it as well. As a result of that, there was a brilliant atmosphere, and credit to the Boro fans as well, who were brilliant in the tributes to Norman and what was a really sort of emotional evening at the Valley. But they've come through all of those tests so far. QPR, again, is a different sort of test, and they will be, make no mistake about it, full of confidence, not just because of their run of results, not just because they're finding goals hard to come by, but the manner of their win against Birmingham the other night. Yeah. I mean, if there's one thing that players talk about in interviews to people like you and me, Dom, it's what a win like that can do for a team, for a club, for a dressing room, in terms of belief and in terms of confidence in themselves and everything in between. So the fact that, and it was Kieran Morgan, was it, a young academy graduate who got the goal in the 96th minute. So they will come to the Riverside absolutely confident that they will be the team to unpick Kim Hellberg for the first time. But equally, Boro will be absolutely right at it, considering their level of confidence and their level of recent performances. And it's going to be a really, really fascinating game. I'm looking forward to watching it.
Yeah, you mentioned Nathan Jones there. He came in afterwards for his post-match press conference, and the first thing he was asked about was Norman Barker, the tributes there. And the first thing he said was, I just want to say thank you to the Boro fans, because they were, I think he said, truly outstanding. And he said not all fans would have been like that. Not all fans would have been as supportive as Boro's fans were. And he said he's not at all surprised, because they're a class football club. It was a great response from Jones, and then he went on to moan about the first half penalty call that went against his side. You think, man, click back into football manager mode.
Absolutely.
But no, he was class. He was class on Boro's fans, and Boro's fans there. I mean, Tuesday night, Charlton, a couple of weeks before Christmas, like immense. I saw, all those like away day accounts that you see on socials. I saw loads of pictures floating around and loads of responses saying that's some effort. And the away end at Hull, I said this to a few of my mates who were there.
I'll tell you what.
I can't remember in a way. And a game I was at, that's the best I've heard a Boro away end sound in years. That sounded class, looked class, and sounded class.
Oh, and the fact that, I mean, the whole travelling support there, honourable mention for them for the fact that they had to sit for 90 plus minutes with swirling, driving rain right into their faces. Where we are in the press box in the commentary position, we're right high at the back, so we're kind of well sheltered. And the way that rain was driving in diagonally right into that corner where the Boro fans were, did they care? Not one jot. Did it dampen the spirits? Not for 1 second. And the fact that, the scoreline and the performance was one of the best of the season, one of the biggest scorelines of the season, was brilliant, because I'm sure it kept everybody from a Boro perspective warm. And what you say about the Charlton, I mean, I made a note of it, 2,457 Boro fans who made that trip to Southeast London on a Tuesday night. And me and Neil saw like loads of them the day of, early morning. We saw loads of them the following days. We were making our way back, and we had that conversation, just saying, look at the dedication of these people who are, many of them are using holidays at work to travel down and to follow their team. And it makes you even more pleased for the fact that the team got the result, and it wasn't not a wasted journey, but there was something to show for that dedication, because that is absolutely phenomenal. And no doubt many of them returning home either early hours or late the next day, and then cracking straight back on with work. It should never be forgotten, that. And I think credit to it, absolutely every single one of them.
If you're watching on YouTube, you'll see our subscription offers running across the bottom there. That's still running, the one that me and Scott have rattled on about for a couple of weeks now. It's just £6 for 6 months, or £26, which will take you through to the end of next year. We've had a great response to that. So thanks so much to all those who've signed up. As we say every week, it is massively, massively appreciated. If you can and you're willing to support, then that'd be great. I'll put the sign up in the show notes, as we always do. But yeah, just to those who have signed up, thank you, because it's massively appreciated. Enjoy the game if you're there this weekend. Let's hope for a 4th straight win under Kim Hellberg. Scott's there for us, so we'll have full analysis and coverage over the course of the weekend. And obviously, if you can't make it, you can listen live to BBC Teaser's coverage as well. So thanks so much for joining us. Thanks to Rob. Take care, and we'll see you next week.